This is a smaller variety of spirea, Stu. They only get about 2.5 to 3 feet tall. It's real popular in landscape these days because it maintains a nice size. But you still need to do some pruning on it. And what you really want to do is remove the blossom heads. See all the brown blossom heads from this year's growth?
Really? And it's all coming up off of one stalk here.
Right. If you notice, it's really just on the top. And all these side buds down here have the capability of also pushing next spring. So either in fall or spring, you want to lighten the load, take off the old blossoms or deadhead the plant, and bring it back down to a nice even shape and uniform shape between the varieties, the plants that you have closer together.
Now, what time of year is this going to be blooming?
It'll be blooming in June, and it'll bloom on wood that starts to grow next spring. So it blooms on new wood. Therefore, even if you chopped it down to 6 inches from the ground, you would get blossoms and an attractive plant by June.
So again, when we're talking about, hey, understand your plants and know what they're supposed to do in the landscape design and what time of year they bloom, this is a good example of, even though it's a spirea, that one you can't prune when it's dormant. This one you can prune when it's dormant because it's blooming on new wood later in June.
Right, exactly. It's important to trim them back and rejuvenate the plant. And that's what you're doing. Whereas the larger ones grow on wood that's established already and bud set the year before.
Now, when it comes to pruning them, what are you doing? Is it just like other deciduous shrubs?
Yeah, just like the potentillas basically, and you want to remove the old blossom heads or deadhead the plant. So if you start in the middle again and you just go through and down, you're creating a really nice, clean looking plant that has a really attractive shape to it and fits in the landscape the size that it was intended to. You're also deadheading the plant or removing all of the old blossom heads to promote all new growth next spring and get rid of the dead wood, which will actually be the blossom heads themselves in the spring of next year. You can do this in fall or spring. Again, you're shaping your landscape, so you want each individual plant to have a relationship with the same varieties of plant. So look at how you trimmed one and then trim the other one accordingly so they don't look like individuals but rather as a grouping of the same variety of plant. You know, Stu, there's hundreds of different varieties of deciduous shrubs, and we can't talk about all of them specifically, but they all kind of fall into general groups, you know, as far as pruning. So once you know where they land and what they're used for in the landscaping, then it's very easy to address it as far as pruning goes. For instance, this one is a fernleaf buckthorn. What we're trying to do is create more of a multi-trunk on the bottom. So we have actually removed small branches and created more of a tree form on the top, as you can see. And as it grows every year, take up a little bit more. It'll be 8 feet high and have a nice multi-trunk on it. This is Forsythia goldtide. It's going to bloom in early spring. It's got great fall color to it. So I wouldn't touch this right now, but really wait till spring, until after the blossoms. Then you can go back and trim it back even into here so that you have a nice fullness to the plant and it doesn't get out of whack in the landscaping. Rest of the summer it's going to grow and then it'll bloom again the following spring.
It sounds as though a lot of this pruning, you're really trying to rein in the design and make sure everything stays where it's supposed to be in the initial plan.
Yep, keep it at a certain size or shape, and obviously a lot of that's done by the landscape design. The rest of it's done by trimming. This viburnum also had some tall sticky growth on the top, just a few branches. Just don't worry about the fact that this blooms on old wood. Just trim them off and shape it a little bit more. Heavy trimming is when you're going to remove all the plants themselves. Over here we have some Weigelia, wine and roses, and what I did is basically go through and trim off some of the top growth but leaving as much of the uniform plant as possible, because again that'll bloom on the old wood set from this year, and it also actually blooms on new wood. So general pruning is after the first flush.
It doesn't seem as though you're going to hurt the plant so much with pruning as much as you're promoting new growth. And if you happen to prune at the wrong time of year, it just means you're not going to enjoy its spring beauty
Right. Yeah.
when the spring comes around.
Exactly. Just a little bit of pruning isn't going to hurt anything. Just the chopping or not pruning at all for years and then trying to get it back to where it was is going to hurt more than anything else.
Are there any exceptions to these general rules?
There's always a few general exceptions. One would be Hydrangea Annabelle. It just does much better if you trim it down to about 6 inches from the ground, and you can do that in the fall or the spring. In fact, a lot of people like to bring the blossoms in late fall before the first killing frost, dry them and use them over the winter. But at least you have trimmed it down to 6 inches so that when the new growth starts, it's much thicker and firmer. It doesn't blossom and fall over like it would otherwise.
But as with anything in the landscape design, good idea to contact your McKay representative if you have any questions at all on any of this deciduous shrub pruning.
Sure. The good thing is once you have done it once, you're really going to get the hang of it fast. And just to remember to do it on a yearly basis is going to be the general key to keeping everything in tow for years to come.
When pruning dormant deciduous shrubs, be sure to keep these key points in mind.